Our second speaker is Sarah Sun. Sarah has almost a decade of experience from the financial industry with a specialty in data value creation. Educated at the University of Waterloo with a double major in mathematical finance and statistics, she has a broad array of experience covering business analytics, predictive modeling, data science, recruiting, innovation, ventures, data governance, monetization, and strategy. As a Chief Data Strategist for GoldSpot Discoveries, she is focused on driving long-term growth and revenue through a new approach to resource investing, the combination of fundamental investing and AI-quantitative investing for the resource market. Because she's working for the GoldSpot Discoveries, she also promised she will bring us a couple of gold bars as a donation to AI Gigs.
Uh-oh.
Do you have them, or?
Sure.
Okay.
We'll chat afterwards.
Okay, so we can go forward with the talk. In her other hobbies, Sarah is also a coach for the Math Team Canada at the International Math Olympiad. This is for high schoolers? Or?
Yeah, it's a high school competition.
How many you have high school kids? Raise your hands. There you go. So see Sarah if you want them to get very good in math. She will talk today about artificial intelligence trends across industries. So let's pass the mic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. As Dragos mentioned, I'm Chief Data Strategist of GoldSpot Discoveries. I'm going to talk a little bit about trends in AI, and you'll see what I mean by that in a little bit. So, what do we do at GoldSpot? GoldSpot is a 3.5-year-old startup company. We are about 30, I was going to say 30 years old. No, we are about 30 people, and we are actually publicly listed. We went public in February earlier this year, and our specialty is we do artificial intelligence for mineral exploration. So, what does it actually mean? Well, first of all, I work in mining. I work in the mining industry. This is an old, archaic industry that needs to change, and it's starting. It's at the very, very, very beginning of its AI adoption train. So as a result, I actually do a lot of education. People want to know, what is AI? What does that mean? And at GoldSpot, for us, that is actually a perfect intersection where we take old traditional geoscience skills and we put them together with the machine learning and the data science and the AI talent that there is in the world here today. When I say mineral exploration, what does that actually mean? So our clients today, with the whole business use case is that they have a plot of land somewhere, they've got mining rights to that plot of land, and they're looking for a specific mineral. Now, what is that mineral these days? This year, gold is really, really popular, and obviously being GoldSpot, we do a lot of gold. Copper is a very, very close second, but we've also done a ton of work across silver, platinum, titanium. Very, very interesting. Our technology is mineral agnostic. It's a lot of fun. But the idea is actually super, super simple. We think that minerals are forming in the earth for a reason. So why don't we go and use the power of data and machine learning for us to actually analyze everything and understand the correlations and find the recipe for what it means for a gold deposit to form. So then, once we understand that signature, we apply that across all of the data across your entire property, and we try to find more gold, more copper, more silver, whatever it is to your heart's content. So what does that data actually look like? Well, okay. I have a visualization here for you. If I woke up on the right side of the bed, I would have had my iPad and had a really cool interactive presentation for you. But since I forgot it, you're stuck with this really poor quality video. So at its very, very base level, you can imagine we start with satellite images, right? There's Google Earth, there's tons and tons of different satellites that are taking images of the Earth, sometimes dozens of times a day. Surprising. Every single little dot that you see there, it's a little hard to see from the back, actually represents somebody who walked into the field and actually had to pick up soil, water, or a vegetation sample, collect all of that, and send that into a lab. This is very, very manual. That is what geophysics data looks like, so remote sensing data. What we do there is, well, modern day, we're using a lot more like helicopters and drones, but we're actually measuring gravitational fields, electromagnetic fields, LiDAR, radar, seismic, whatever we can measure, get our hands on, that's what we're measuring. So if I take those layers of data, I pull them back a bit, we can see what's underground. You'll see a bunch of these lines. Now, every single one of those lines represents a drill that has reached hundreds of meters into the earth, pulled out core, as we called it, and then we again send that into the lab to be broken down into its chemical compounds. Geologists, what you're seeing there is a fault in the earth. They specialize in understanding the earth's features. That is this part of the video really needs to be retimed, but I can never catch up to it. But the cross section, that funny heat map, is again, it's the remote sensing, the geophysics data, but we're looking at sort of a depth dimension to that exact same data. And then what you see there in blue is essentially what our team does, which is actually tries to predict where the mineral is going to be formed. What does that data look like? So here, these are actually some snapshots of data that I took from a project that we worked on about a year ago. It looks very, very interesting. Geospatial data is absolutely fascinating and extremely challenging. On a single project, we're working with anywhere between 60 and 100 different layers of data. A different layer of data, consider that a data type. So here you can see electromagnetic, you see geology, you'll see like drill holes, you'll see some data will actually just look like points on a map. A lot of the data looks like these really funny heat maps. It is absolutely fascinating how we're able to put all of that data together and then come up with some concrete insights from that. A typical project for us starts with, we actually send our own geologists and some of our data scientists on site to meet with the client on the land itself. That is so, so important. A typical project for us takes anywhere between 4 and 8 months, depending on the size and the quantity of data that we're working with. But the 2 to 4 weeks that we spend with the client are absolutely invaluable. Some of the projects that we work on, the geologists that have worked on that land package have been with that project for 20 years. There is nobody who understands the features in that landscape the way that that geologist does. And it's our job to work with them, understand the nuances of their data that is not being represented in any of the maps or any of the data sets that they have given us, and find a way to translate that and put that in, to stitch it together with everything that we have in a way that our computers can actually understand. Then we impart on everyone's favorite, the data cleaning aspect, where we're taking those 80 layers of data, we're transforming them, we're stitching them together, we're cleaning it up, we're finding errors, and then that's just super fun. Everyone loves this stage of the game. And then we throw it over the fence. Our geological data scientists, as well as our just pure data scientists, they iterate. They build models, they iterate, they show it to the client, they work with the geologists. It is extremely, extremely iterative. The machine comes out with an idea, we talk about it. Why do we think it's there? It can't really be a black box, because how do you bring a client on board who doesn't believe in AI on board if you're not able to convince them that you're looking at the right data and the right signatures are there? So we work with the client, and then only after a certain point in time, we have to cut off that process, and at the very, very end, my favorite part, we turn over treasure maps. So we literally say, dig here now. This is where we think the largest probability of gold or copper or titanium is going to be on your property. Cool, eh? There's not a lot of people doing it. And we actually have, I think, the best startup story of all time. So about 4 years ago, actually it was almost exactly 4 years ago, there was a company who ran a hackathon. And they said, here's 6 terabytes worth of data. Help us find gold. We'll drill the top targets, and the team who wins gets $1 million. We didn't win, unfortunately. We came second place. But I think we won in the fact that we actually became a real company, and we're embarked on this journey of what that actually means in governing, whereas the winning team, I have no idea what they did with that money. They took it and ran. Who knew? What GoldSpot does, super fun, super fascinating. Some of the backstory. Dragos has told you that I am actually not a geologist. I didn't go to school for geology. I am brand new to this. It has been about 18 months into my GoldSpot journey. So Dragos told me the only rule that we have for AI geeks is talk about something that you're passionate about. So he's in for a little bit of a surprise, because I don't think he really knows what I'm going to talk about. So, so 18 months of working in an industry that is struggling with adoption. 18 months of road showing and talking to people at hundreds of conferences. I've been on this stage I don't know how many times, and I'm actually here at the end of the year, and I kind of want to share with you some of the favorite things that people have said to me through time. And they are about 10 different themes that we're going to go through today. So, first one. I don't believe in AI. I have had people say this to me so many times. I'm not even sure I know what to do with this statement anymore. I don't believe in AI. So then you have to distill it. Do you mean like AI in general? And I've met people who are like, no, I don't believe that like AI is a thing. This is a trend. This is a fad. I'm like, well, great. If you've ever used a bank account, if you've ever driven on the road, if you've ever turned on your TV or watched Netflix or used a cell phone, guess what? AI is built into all of that. Whether, it doesn't matter what you call it, advanced analytics, right? It can be, some form of AI exists in your world today unless you live under a rock. For those of people who don't believe it can work in geology, someone actually specified, they're like, I like you and I like your team, there's so much passion and enthusiasm, but I don't believe that this is a problem that's going to be solved. And so I tried a different tactic. I said, what about if I told you our biggest competitor is IBM? Then all of a sudden he's like, oh, IBM sees an opportunity in this? Oh, I'm going to have to look into it. Interesting. Next. What if your machine finds things that aren't actually there? A geologist said this to me, and he was actually a professor. So I responded with, I probably shouldn't have, but I responded with, what happens when the geologist finds something that isn't there? Like, there's it's the exact same thing. If anything, the geologist now can say, blame it on the machine, be like, oh, it's the machine's fault, right? Or in this, if by some extension, it's GoldSpot's fault. So, interesting. I think there's a lot of misperceptions and weird ideas of what it means to be working in AI and what it means to work with AI, and we're going to get through some more of those themes going forward. What do we have next? Misunderstanding. This is probably my favorite one. So this, I will have to admit, this is the only quote that was not said to me directly. I was at a conference when someone said it to the presenter, who was a friend of mine, and said, neural nets are modeled after the brain, which is the ultimate path to intelligence as proved by nature. And I think, first of all, my colleague just looked flabbergasted. Then he was like, well, airplanes didn't evolve through nature. We built them, but they're still doing okay. And so it was interesting. This was actually very early days of AI, before I was working at GoldSpot, and this idea of deep learning and neural nets it's a beautiful algorithm. And it probably didn't help that the talk that the presenter was at was actually talking about the weaknesses of neural nets and some of the considerations that need to come into play when you're looking at deep learning, neural nets, CNNs, et cetera. Name your favorite neural net algorithm right here. And so this was an interesting one. If AI can play Dota, why can't we use it to play the stock market? I get this one about every month. I kid you not. I have had people who are investors. I have had people that I know very well and have worked with through many, many years. I have had people that I work with internally in the company. Every single time OpenAI does something cool, like win hide and seek, they send me an article and they're just like, what's taking you so long to figure out this stock market resource investment thing? Like, AI is so easy. The number of times I've gotten, there's like a particular video that's like 7 minutes to predict the stock market, where someone teaches you in 7 minutes how to create a linear regression. It's a linear regression to predict the price of a stock market, a stock. I'm like, great, why aren't you out making millions and millions of dollars? You've solved the stock market problem. This representation of what AI is in the media is a humongous pet peeve for me. We like to talk about the upsides, but the media is not doing a really great job of talking about why this is such a hard problem, and it is a hard problem. Otherwise, we wouldn't have PhDs and specialists and researchers and companies like us trying to figure out how to do new and innovative things across every single industry in the world. Ugh. I'm tired of the video game aspect. This clicker doesn't like me. One moment. There we go. Fear. I don't want my company to work with you because you're going to take my job. This is a very real, it's funny you laugh, but I actually first heard this when I was working at the bank. And it was people within the bank that were saying this to my team because we were going in and I was doing roadmaps for AI within the banks. So this is interesting. A geologist said this as well, being like, this is really cool, but yeah, I'm not gonna introduce you to my management team because this is a rocky industry where it already has a very cyclical history of layoffs and I really don't need to put myself out of a job. What they don't realize is yes, things are going to change in the future. Like you guys already have heard the usual spiel of AI is not replacing you, AI is a tool. But the reality is, in the future, AI will replace jobs. There are some very, very manual jobs that will be replaced. There are some incredible innovations that I'm starting to see that have incredible impacts when it comes to things like health and safety in very, very dangerous areas like mining and construction. It's going to be amazing what that can do. So those jobs are going to go away. But no one fully understands how some of those jobs are going to transform and they're going to change. And then there's going to be a whole host of new jobs that we can't even imagine today that are suddenly going to exist. So it is not just a matter of jobs are going away, but it's what's the change management behind that, and how are we managing expectations, and how are we being open to the realities and the possibilities of what the future holds for us. It doesn't have to necessarily be scary. But this I can understand, because when I started out my career, I was a data scientist. No, actually that's not true. I was a business analyst, and then I became a statistician. And then the company that I worked for decided that data science is a new cool sexy thing, so we're going to retool all of our statisticians and we're going to become data scientists. But I was working in platforms like SAS. I used to be a great SAS programmer. Less than 5 years out, I'm suddenly being asked to reskill myself and go into more of the Python, et cetera. And I considered myself young at the age of 24, and I'm sitting there complaining, being like, why do I have to do this? What is this? This is not what I went to school for. I'm not a programmer. I don't like programming. What is this? So I've been there, and I understand how scary change can be. But it required for me to change my mindset going forward. And I think that's why change management is going to be so, so important as we start guiding more and more people through this journey. Oh, this one's really good. I was at a conference in March here in Toronto. It was a geology conference. There was a fellow who'd been hanging around the booth for 2 days. I kept seeing him walking by. And then one day, the booth was like completely empty. It was just me and one other person. The usual crowds had left. And he finally approached and he was like, yeah, he's like, I really have an issue with you using the word AI, because AI means your machines are sentient. Are you sentient? And I should have said yes, and they're coming for you next. But I didn't, and I went through this exploratory journey of being like, that's a really interesting point of view. I will have to say that I actually disagree with your definition of artificial intelligence. I told him a little bit of how I thought, and then he's like, yeah, sure, that's fine, but like, AI was really defined by the science fiction genre, and this is not true artificial intelligence. And I'm like, you know what? We're just gonna agree to disagree. So it's very rare, but occasionally I do come across an individual who is actually not interested in having a real debate with you. They're not interested in having an open conversation. They literally just want to tell you something and say that you're wrong and run off. That was interesting. That was definitely a little bit out there. That being said, I was at Brock University on the weekend, and I had a student who actually had the same kind of views. We had this really interesting conversation, and there was a lot of Skynet and like how AI is being used for bad, and how everyone's watching you and everything's listening to you. And he was telling me how he didn't like to use his cell phone because he knows he's listening to him. And it's interesting. Like this was a current student, right? So these fears, these ideas still do abound. Oh, sorry. Oh, this one. So another conference that I was at, and another individual approached me. And so he said, so I hear you like data. I was like, yeah, I love data. What do you got for me? He's like, well, I've acquired these 40 boxes of data. I'm like, excuse me? Like boxes of data? He's like, yeah, like one, like, I'm like, of what? He's like, like mining data. I'm like, okay, where did you get this data? And then as I like started to talk to him, my chief geologist, she was standing next to me this whole time, and there's a point in time where she was kind of just like, Sarah, cut it off, Sarah. No. So I'm like, okay, well, here's my card. Why, call me. Maybe we'll chat later. So it turned out that this idea that data is the new oil, which has been around for like this phrase itself has probably been around for like 7 or 8 years now, right? But it's so ingrained in people, but yet people don't actually understand what that actually means. And so there's actually literally a black market for data. There is a history of geologists, mining companies where people are breaking into warehouses to steal boxes of old paper maps to sell them on the black market. And this was the case. This was what happened in this case. I felt like I was actually propositioned by a guy in a trench coat where he had maps waiting in the wings. Astounding. And this was actually not the only time that this has happened to me. In 2 separate occasions, I've had people try to sell me data that we suspect was actually stolen. Interesting. Apparently this actually exists. My geologist told me that this is actually where I learned so much about the topic of geoethics. And all of our geologists will actually lose their licenses if we are ever caught working on something like illegal stolen data. So very, very concerning. Very gray area, this. On the topic of ethics, so I actually get this quite often. Maybe you can tell me a little bit. This is usually what happens when I'm sitting on a panel and everyone else is from some sort of a bank or a marketing background, and they're like, oh, we're talking about ethics. Sarah hasn't said anything in a while, but they're like, oh, she used to work in banking, let's ask. But it's interesting because there are so many more industries out there, and you'd be surprised. This topic of ethics is not unique to banking or healthcare. It's the idea of personal, private information. Maybe what is private information, what is very personal, and what is important changes by industries, but you can actually learn so much by looking to other industries and learning from what they have to show you. So like I mentioned, geologists, the geologist designation is a protected designation. You pay fees based on the country you work in, the province, the jurisdiction that you're in and you're at, and they undergo regular recertification. From an ethics perspective, they have a moral obligation to report shady dealings that are either happening within their own companies or other geologists that they have found. So some of our geologists have told me these horrible stories where clients have turned over data for resource estimation, and that's where you actually go through and build the models to say, we think there's 2 million ounces of copper in the ground. They have told me stories where the client withheld some of the data, and they withheld the bad data. So the evidence where there was no mineralization, so they were only working with data that showed that there was tons and tons of copper in the ground. What happens? They vastly overpredict what the resource is. When they actually go to drill and they actually go through the due diligence, at that point in time, it's revealed that they didn't even have 1/10 of what was predicted. Guess what? Guess who never got hired again? Challenging, right? It's interesting. But this idea of ethics crosses so many different boundaries, and if you're looking for ideas, try other industries. You'd be surprised how far ahead that they can be in certain aspects. Collision Conference. Did any of you go to Collision in May this year in Toronto? It was humongous. It was a lot of fun if you have a chance to go. A little overwhelming. So I had someone who was representing an HR firm, ironically, and she came and she walked by. She happened to walk in during the middle of my pitch, and at the end she was like, "Wow, you have AI people? There's only 20 of them in the world. Like, how did you manage to hire any of them?" I don't know if any of you noticed, there was a newspaper article going around at the beginning of the year which said there's only 17 AI specialists in the world. There's only 17 people who graduated with a PhD in AI. Wow, and she's in HR. It's no wonder that recruiting can be so extremely challenging. And so I went through this journey of explaining that you don't have to have a designation in AI to be a fantastic AI researcher. In fact, some of the best AI researchers I know, they're computer scientists, they come from very, very heavy math backgrounds, they're computer programmers. You can still work in data science without having done an undergrad and then a master's and then a PhD in artificial intelligence. Other things that I'm starting to notice in recruiting. Whenever I hire, there's some disturbing trends that I'm starting to see when it comes to the resume side of things. this, I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but I'm noticing more and more where there's no organization anymore, and it looks like the resumes are just designed to get through some sort of automatic word search filter. So the first page will literally be anywhere from 20 to 30 just bullets. That's it. No categories, no listing of where it is, anything. They're very, very hard to read. So that's one thing that I find extremely, extremely challenging. As well, the network that we create by going to all of these different events and the people that you meet, fantastic place to meet mentors, people who can help you in your careers, people who can give you advice. But I would say be a little bit more targeted with how you're going about that. For example, this week alone, I have gotten 3 different LinkedIn messages that literally all say the same thing. I am looking for a job, help. I'm like, okay, but what do you want help with? Like, do you want someone to help you go through your resume? Do you want someone to help you understand and target what is the market in there? Are you actually just looking for me to like look at your resume and see if I have an opening for you internally? The word help doesn't mean anything unless you put an action behind it. It can be very, very challenging, and for those of us who actually want to be able to contribute in some way, be very targeted and be aware that they are taking time out of your day to do this, so make it easy for them with this very, very specific ask. Other trends that I've noticed. For those of you who are hiring people and you're working for large organizations and you have the luxury of having an HR manager, what I would do for an HR manager in a startup, do yourselves a favor and always make sure you're reading that final posting as it goes out. Because the number one problem that I'm seeing for students or interns who are looking for a job is the comment which is like, Sarah, I don't have time to learn all these programming languages before I apply for this job. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, it says it needs Java and C++ and Python and R and SAS. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, are you sure that you applied to the co-op, like the internship posting? And they like show it to me and like, holy cow. Like, no, this organization, like this should be rephrased as you demonstrated excellence and experience in programming languages such as. If there is actually something that you're using in-house that you think is absolutely necessary, call that out. But the expectations out there, it is very daunting for students to see this, or anyone who's looking to change careers or step into the industry for the first time. And let's be serious here. How many people did you hire that you thought were superstars that didn't have all of that experience? Or if they did have all of that experience, could you afford them? Interesting, right? Interesting. So if you really care about hiring the best and the brightest there is out there, have a really critical look at the way the job posting is worded and what it's being done. And for anyone who's struggling with maybe from the diversity perspective, here's an interesting use case. The TD Bank was hiring a very, very senior economist position this year. Their chief economist is a woman. When the job posting first went out, 100% of applicants that they had were male. They could not understand what it was. So what she did is she took this job posting, she looked at it, and she rewrote it. She changed certain terms, she changed the requirements, and so little things like instead of like leading a team of analysts, you can change that to things like empowering a team of analysts, inspiring. Like, what are the true leadership skills that are necessary there? And then all of a sudden, they didn't do an announcement, nothing. They just quietly posted this job posting out there again, and all of a sudden, their applications incoming were suddenly gender balanced. Interesting, right? Interesting how these little things can actually make a humongous difference. And then my final topic, obviously, we all know and we all understand and we all love the idea of diversity. But I want to challenge people out there, because diversity does not mean simply my gender, my sexual orientation, or my background, or how I look. But it is actually the best and the strongest teams that I have ever worked with and that I've ever seen out there. They are truly diverse also in thought, education, the industries that they come from, their backgrounds, and their experience. By putting together a truly cross-functional team of experienced hires, new hires, interns, it is incredible the kind of magic that comes out of that. Just sitting in a room as everyone's encountering a white space problem for the first time and watching the theoretical physicist struggle with an idea and she throws it out there, and then watching my PhD in computational chemistry chime in with an idea that she worked on during her PhD, and then watching my master's in stats intern, also chime in with an idea that he learned when he was on a co-op project for a telco. Magic just absolutely happens. There's so much more experimentation, there's so many aha moments, and it's absolutely fascinating. This is the only way that you can guarantee that you've seen different types of data, different types of use cases, different types of algorithms, is hire people who've worked with all sorts of different things. It is a lot of work. And I am from the University of Waterloo, and I'm so supportive of the Waterloo program, but I know that if I hire out of the same school every single candidate that I have, they actually are trained to look and think in the same way, and they also inherently come with the exact same ideas, just despite the program. And so it's absolutely imperative that you're really expanding your teams out there, and it does take a lot more work, I'm not gonna lie. It takes a lot more work and a lot more time, and it can be much, much more challenging, but the magic that comes out of having a truly cross-functional, diverse team, absolutely incredible. So I hope I didn't shock Dragos too much. Again, my name is Sarah Sun. I am Chief Data Strategist at GoldSpot Discoveries, and I hope you enjoyed my talk tonight.
We have time for a few questions.
Hey Sarah, thanks for your talk. I just got one question. What in your opinion, would be the number one reason why, I guess right now, most AI projects fail?
Oh, the number one reason. You only want one. Oh boy. Unrealistic expectations. That's the number one thing we're seeing with our clients, especially doing what we do. Our biggest competitor is actually not other startups like us. It's actually clients who are big enough that have the cash to build their own data science teams. And we're seeing those teams now come and talk to us because it's been 2 to 3 years and it's been a massive failure because they have one data scientist locked up in a room somewhere, and the expectations that's heaped on this one person are just completely ridiculous.
Another reason maybe their participants don't join AI Geeks, so they don't learn this stuff.
Of course.
Hi, congratulations on your company. It's a remarkable story, very inspiring. It inspired a million questions, but I'm going to limit it to 2. The first question is, there are so many data points that you listed that you have to analyze and go through. And then you mentioned a lot of talk about the geologists. So I just wondered if you did any sort of profiling of geologists, sort of a Moneyball kind of approach where you're looking at how they perform and say, oh, this person can't seem to find gold, but they find copper like they have a divine mind, that kind of thing. And if you keep that sort of profile and then dig into what they look for while they're out in the field, or the kind of work that they're doing to try and help give direction to the data.
Yeah,
analysis.
no, actually, we do a lot of that. For instance, so for us, it's not so much the mineral that they find, it's the expertise they have. Right. So our geologists are spread out. We've got structural engineering, mining engineering, geochemistry, geophysics, geology. Those are like the big key buckets. The geophysicist, we've got 2 just all-star geophysicists, and they're so much fun to watch, but confusing, because they sit there and they look at all these maps on their screen, and they'll like change the colors, they'll invert the colors, they'll darken it, they'll light it, they'll switch between 2 maps, and she'll be like, aha, I knew it, there's something there. And I'm like, Brenda, what changed? And she's like, you see that squiggle? That squiggle, it didn't go away when you changed the colors, like there's something there. And I'm like, what are you talking about, right? It's so interesting. But by watching her, and then the way she's processing that information, we're trying to take what her process and try to find a data way of doing that. So she's literally looking at an anomaly in a wave pattern, and we can measure that with math.
Right. Do you tie it to performance, though? You mentioned a 20-year-old geologist who's probably been on many expeditions, and how they did. Do you tie those 2 things?
No, but it's an interesting idea, and I like the idea.
Okay. And the second thing was you mentioned trouble recruiting. Had you thought about going back to the winning team and trying to track down their original team and
we
hire
have one of them.
Oh,
yeah,
well done.
We tracked that. So that was an annual competition that they did, and we actually do watch the winners because it is a great source of a fantastic source of talent. And there's been some other competitions inspired more in the like Australia side of things. Yeah, we keep very, very close tabs on from talent from a competition perspective. And you never know, right? If we're getting so big and we like these guys, like, why don't we just go in and buy them up? Or we could get bought out ourselves.
Can we have the last question from a lady? Okay. Men are always coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. It was really fun and very enlightening. My question is, with the customers that you have, what happens once you build the model and everything's okay? Like, they take the model, they run, they dig. I mean, how do you measure?
Yeah, that's literally it. So because we're turning over targets, then what happens is ideally they've got some sort of a drill budget, and this drill budget, so it is very expensive to drill holes.
That's
so
right.
a typical drill hole will cost $100,000 to $200,000 kind of idea, and you need hundreds to thousands of them for a single property. So we help them optimize their drill budget, saying, sometimes you want to drill exactly where you think everyone agrees that you think there is. Sometimes you want to drill in a spot where there's uncertainty, because the data that comes out of that, being like, we're not sure if there's something here, can provide so much more intel from that perspective. And so what we're seeing as well is at this point in time, just the long life of mining. So the day you think you have something, the day you build a mine could be 15 years. So funding works in stage gates. So when we come in with our targets and our ideas, the first thing that they want to do is they show this to their executives. The executives will now approve the drill budget. And we've had executives say, listen, when GoldSpot works with our geologists, comes together, and there's targets that overlap, like those targets for sure, I will absolutely approve the budget. Then convince me why the other ones, what's the strategy for the rest of them?
Is it when they approve the budget that you consider that model is successful?
No.
Or is it when they really drill and
they drill into the ground, which can sometimes, depending on the project, can take years. if they decide not to. So it is a long tailwind, and that's been a tough one for us to be able to wait and say and see what's happening. Internally, when we backtest, fantastic. Some of the things that we can't talk about, fantastic. Some of the things that we just press release because we're finally starting to get permission and some results out of there, home run. Just fantastic.
So a 3 years old company,
yes,
till date, I don't think you have a client that really drilled. And
we do. We've had several.
You did?
Yes, but whether or not we can talk about them, that's the challenge, right? But we are now, we can talk about 2 success cases, absolutely, where, they drilled, fantastic success. They're collecting more data for the next round of drilling.
Perfect.
Really exciting.
Oh, good luck.
Thank you.
So you're coming to our next meeting to talk about this, right?
Yeah, actually, I really hope so. We've done some really cool mapping.
Okay, nice. Thank you very much, Sarah.